The dusty lanes of a small Indian town carried whispers that never seemed to fade. It was a place where the days were simple, where girls learned to dream quietly, and where Meera, a 22-year-old teacher, spent her life believing that kindness could change people. She taught village children under the shade of a neem tree, her laughter echoing between mud walls and tin roofs. Her world was humble but warm. Her mother sold flowers near the temple, and her younger brother studied in the same school where Meera worked. Every morning, she rode her bicycle through the lanes, the wind lifting her dupatta as she smiled at familiar faces. But one evening, everything changed. The sun had set, and Meera was cycling home after staying late to grade her students' papers. The streets were quieter than usual. A festival had drawn most people to the temple square. She felt the cool wind and thought of her mother's dinner waiting at home. Then, her bicycle chain slipped. As she bent to fix it near an empty stretch, a van slowed beside her. She didn't remember much after that. Only voices, fear, darkness, and pain. When she opened her eyes again, she was lying in a hospital bed, her body bruised, her voice trembling. Her mother was beside her, crying silently. The doctors avoided her eyes. The police asked questions she didn't know how to answer. Meera stared at the ceiling and felt her world collapse into silence. Days turned into weeks. Reporters came, politicians visited, and the town that once admired her now whispered behind her back. Some blamed her for staying late. Others avoided her mother's flower stall. Meera felt invisible, not because people didn't see her, but because they only saw her pain. But within that darkness, something began to change. A young social worker named Ananya visited her in the hospital. She spoke softly, listened without judgment, and told Meera that her life wasn't over. "You have the right to fight," Ananya said, "not just for yourself, but for every girl who's been silenced." Those words ignited a spark in Meera's heart. When she returned home, she was still fragile, physically and emotionally. But instead of hiding, she decided to act. She went to the police again, filed a full report, and faced the men who had destroyed her peace. It wasn't easy. Their lawyers tried to shame her, calling her names, twisting her truth. Meera trembled in court, but each time she spoke, her voice grew stronger. The town watched in disbelief. They had expected her to disappear quietly, but she refused. Her courage began to stir others. Local women marched beside her, demanding justice. The same streets that once echoed with gossip now filled with chants. "We want justice for Meera." Months passed. The legal battle was exhausting. There were threats, bribes, and moments when she almost gave up. But every time she looked at her mother's tired eyes, she found strength. She told herself she wasn't just fighting for her dignity. She was fighting for every daughter of her land. Finally, after nearly a year, the court declared the men guilty. The judge's words were like a storm breaking, fierce, cleansing, final. Meera's tears fell freely, but this time they weren't of fear. They were of relief, of victory, of reclaiming her life. The news spread across the state. People who once whispered her name in shame now spoke it with respect. Her school reopened its doors to her, and her students ran to hug her. Meera resumed teaching, standing before her class with the same warm smile, but now with a strength that shone through her eyes. In the evenings, she started a women's support group with Ananya. They visited nearby villages, teaching girls about safety, self-defense, and the law. She told her story not with tears but with power, transforming her pain into purpose. Years later, Meera stood on a stage at a national conference, speaking before hundreds of people. Her sari shimmered under the lights, her voice calm and confident. "No woman should have to beg for her dignity," she said, "and no crime can silence the truth forever." The audience rose to applaud her. That night, as she looked at the stars outside her hotel window, she whispered a quiet prayer for every girl still trapped in fear. She knew the scars would always remain, but she had learned to live with them, not as reminders of her pain, but as symbols of her survival. Meera had become what she once thought impossible, a light beyond the shadows, and somewhere, in the small town she called home, the wind carried her story, not as a whisper of pity, but as a roar of hope.